Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the NCCR podcast. I'm the man behind the scene, the little one, the hat one.
Jeez.
Introducing two dynamic women of God. They are my good friends and your hosts. Please give a warm applause for Kim Matson and Amanda Sykes.
Wow, that was a long. I feel like we should be in a cage match after that.
Or like running onto a basketball court.
Yes.
You know, that is the longest anybody's ever said my name before.
Well, I tried.
Well, I liked it.
Don't encourage him. Next week it could be.
Oh, yes.
You know,
we're going for time. We're going for time.
No, we're going for time.
Oh, yeah.
Time and distance.
So, ladies,
Yes.
how was your weekend?
Busy. Very busy.
You know, Amanda, it's funny that you said busy because there's a tendency to be distracted. It seemed like that was a theme this weekend, especially Sunday.
There were many themes in our real lives, and also pointed out to us on Sunday by Steve Spear, because he covered a lot of ground on Sunday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we're going to attempt to capture some of those moments this morning.
Yeah, I got 2 pages of notes, and that was with me cutting stuff out.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think you're going to start with reading.
2 Peter 3, 1 through 7. And shout out to our friend Stephanie, because I am reading the Amplified version.
Oh, wow.
Oh, boy, hold up.
She'll be
Amanda,
thrilled.
Please don't do that. Don't do that to me. We're a good team. We're friends.
We're friends.
And I do love my wife, but come on. Do we want to do that to the audience?
We have to, because
Apparently,
it's
today
glorious.
We're doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, go
Shout
for
out,
it.
Steph. Beloved, I am now writing you this second letter. In this, as in the first one, I am stirring up your untainted mind to remind you that you should remember the words spoken in the past about the future by the holy prophets and the commandment of the Lord and Savior given by our apostles, his personally chosen representatives. First of all, know without any doubt that mockers will come in the last days with their mocking, following after their own human desires and saying, "Where is the promise of his coming? What has become of it? For ever since the fathers fell asleep in death, all things have continued exactly as they did from the beginning of creation, for they willingly forgot the fact that the heavens existed long ago by the word of God, and the earth was formed out of water and by water, through which the world at that time was destroyed by being flooded with water. But by his word the present heavens and earth are being reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly people."
Yeah.
Let's take a moment for Stephanie.
Yeah.
And there's the applause that she will be getting.
Yes.
That's it. No more amplified.
That's it. You're done now. Well, that is pretty blatant.
Yeah.
I mean,
Seriously. I love how he starts. I mean, beloved, I love that. But also, like, reminder, this is the second time.
this just in, because Christ is coming back, and,
Right.
and we do hear that. And I've had comments, well, when do you think? It's like, I don't know. I'm not supposed to know. Nobody's supposed to know,
Yeah.
and nobody does know. God knows. So
Right.
people that will do those doomsday things and whatever, and they don't know how many. I mean, just in my lifetime, there's a dozen world's ending on Saturday, so you better fix your business. Get right, get all your ducks in a row, because he's coming.
Yeah.
And of course, that hasn't happened. But
Wolves.
I mean, these false teachers,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them, they're wanting us to waver, right? They want to find us in a weak place and kind of push us over.
It's pretty clear in the Bible that nobody knows when he's coming back.
Exactly.
So let me ask you this, these ladies. Amanda, just what you just said, nobody knows when Christ is coming back. But yet, many are deceived by these wolves. Because I think about the People's Temple, that group that went down to Jonestown, Guyana, and some.
Oh, the purple guys in the Nike tennis shoes?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know how those people reading the Word, or were they reading the Word, got duped by those wolves. You know, it just baffles me sometimes, you know, when I think about the consequence, because they paid a dear price with their lives, you know, falling behind these wolves.
Yeah. I was going to read too. I was going to read Psalm 90, verse 4. For 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by. And then 2 Peter 3, verse 8, which we'll clearly start with next week. But I'm going to jump ahead. Do not forget this one thing. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. Because, again, we measure time in our space and time, right?
Yeah. Very different
we don't
from God's.
have anything to differentiate. We just know what we know, and don't confuse me with anything else, I guess. But it's always interesting when folks start down that path. I think this is a sign. It very well may be a sign.
Right.
But I think there's going to be absolutely no question as to when Christ actually comes back. It's going to be loud and furious and no doubt in your mind that that's what this is.
Yeah.
Not this, there is clamoring, there is other things, there's noise, there's confusion, there's chaos. But again, it's been happening since the fall of man, right? We did it to ourselves. We continue to do it to ourselves. We're desperate for rescue, and he has promised that he's coming back. So we shouldn't question that at all.
Yeah,
we
just
question
have
all
to
the
trust.
other things if you want to, I guess, but there should be no doubt about that.
Yeah. Speaking of doubt, Steve talked about doubt. Doubt happens to everyone. Doubt is a natural part of the faith journey, but it's not our final destination.
Right.
Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." And yet we still have doubt.
Well, doubt is just uncertainty and fear, typically. You don't know about a thing you feel like you should know about or want to know about, or you're fearful of it. You do know about it, and it causes you fear and angst, and that's doubt, and that's clearly Jesus tells us what to do with that.
Right.
And then he talked about too the destruction of faith, which I found it's just such an interesting concept where people will like actively and aggressively start questioning every component of their faith because it just isn't serving them anymore. So they'll go looking for ways to deconstruct or ruin their beliefs. And he listed 5 things, and I think I got them mostly right. Sorry. A traumatic experience, emotional or moral doubt, an excuse to sin, social pressure, and satanic oppression. I
mean, I could see how if you grew up in the church and maybe you were misled by leaders or taught a different theology than what's in the Bible, you might process through those as you grow older and grow in spiritual maturity. But I could also see how it's a real fine line between that and going over to the dark side where you're all the way down to not believing.
Yeah, it is a slippery slope, and there's a lot of those in a faith walk.
You know, he mentioned it a couple of times, and so I'm like, what is this here? And I took a different take on it because I was one of those that, you know, at the tail end, the things that Pastor Steve was talking about, when you invite friends over to have a glass of wine or, you know, smoke a cigar, whatever it may be. I was, you know, growing up, I was told, you don't do that, you're going to hell, blah, da, 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 right? But when as I got older, I really started deconstructing because I wanted to know why. Why do these things? Why was I taught these things?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I believe what I believe? And for me, like you said, man, you can't go on the dark side of that. But to me, it was more of educational portion for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to find out a lot of things that was said was untrue.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I believe, and I stand wholeheartedly on this, let every man and woman work out their own salvation with fear and trembleness of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When you have that connection with God, He will not lead you astray.
Yeah.
And the word reveals itself constantly. You can read something one day, next week you could have a different eye-opening experience with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think it's important too to maybe not deconstruct in isolation, but deconstruct in community.
ooh,
Yeah,
yes.
that's a
Right?
great point.
Yes.
Yep.
Great point, Amanda.
Well,
Great
and
point.
in talking about that too, DeVandis, I wonder if in some of those situational things, like you're specifically forbade to do, 100 things that aren't in the Bible, is that just a control issue then to keep everybody in line, just to manage folks in a
Yeah.
particular way? And there's no question when it's told to you in a very authoritarian way, there's more of a tendency to think, well, they must know what they're talking about.
Right.
And why would I question that? I'll just do as I'm told.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And again, thinking for yourself is critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Steve also talked about rescue, and how we have been rescued, and it is our obligation, our duty to rescue others. And he went down, a lot of ways that a person can do that, inviting somebody to church, or just having a conversation, or doing life with them on small and big levels.
Yeah.
A lot of ways to do that, but we're not rescued for our own benefit.
Yeah.
It's just like having too much to eat and not sharing it with anybody, right? You have to put it all forward. And Steve's mom, and Steve Spear said this on Sunday, and it reminded me, Steve's mom used to always say, you're blessed to be a blessing.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, it's
I love
really
that.
simple and sounds really sweet, but it's very deep when you think about it.
Right. And we're not doing this on our own, right?
Right.
We're the lifeline for the one that saves. We're the door for that. And so I think sometimes we think that we have to do something that we don't need to do.
Or we think we have to
Right.
have all the answers. And like we've talked about before, you don't need to have all the answers, but you just need to extend a hand and start the process.
Yeah.
Look at the answers together.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you with an answer. You don't have to be a know-it-all. You just have to know you're saved, and you would like that same thing for the person you're connecting with, right?
It's like the golden rule: do unto others as you'd want done to you.
Yep.
I like the analogy of the fire rescuers and the special forces, because we are special forces. I like that, special, and we have the force of God behind us, and we are encouraged. No, not encouraged. We have been given an order to go behind enemy line and rescue our brothers and sisters that are still held captive. And when he played that analogy, it just like, oh wow, it was so crystal clear. And I'm like, okay, it's time to put my Rambo hat on, let's go. But it's a spiritual battle that we're facing, and we have to go behind enemy lines to rescue our brothers and sisters.
Well, it's just not a fireman putting a person on their back and carrying them out, which is completely heroic. And I mean, wow,
Seriously.
what an amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
But this building's full of thousands of people, so he has to keep going back in. And that's what we need to do. We can't just say, well, I caught one for you today, Lord, and be good with that. That's not how this that's not how this process works. And
Right. It's an ongoing mission.
it is.
And we're all called to it.
And we are in the mission field. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
What about those that are afraid, or have a fear of rejection, or the scoffers and the mockers? have been loudly in their ear, and so they kind of hide in isolation.
Well, I think that if maybe take another friend who's saved with you, maybe there's ways to do that. If you or I were nervous about a thing, we can invite a third person to coffee or something and just have a conversation. It doesn't have to be tactical in that way, I don't think.
Right.
I think if we just lead with our heart and know what our intent is, and ask God to walk us through that process, because He's not going to let us hang out there.
Yeah.
You know what, Kim? When you was talking about that, it made me think about the coffee mug that you two have. Jesus, you take control of the will.
Yeah.
And when you have those conversations with those individuals, it should be one of the first things. Say, okay, God, you take control of the will. Holy Spirit, you guide this here interaction between us today.
Yeah.
And Amanda, I like how you were talking about the mockers, because Steve said this, and it was, and once again, the dude was just hitting profound statements after another. Don't let wolves make you become a pew sitter.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Well, he was very blunt on Sunday.
Yeah.
About a lot of things.
Right.
Yeah, you know, and not that that skunky blunk, but blunt.
I just promised I would say blunt on the podcast today.
Yeah, a lot of us misheard a word.
A lot of us misheard a word. I wasn't the only one.
That's funny. Well, I was reminded of John 8:12, where it says, "I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life." And I just think those of us that are Jesus followers are supposed to be living honestly before God and others. And if we have shame or fear of rejection, judgment that is keeping us in the dark, there's no freedom in that, right? And we're living in the darkness, and we're supposed to be living in light. And
that feels like punishment.
Right.
Not light and happiness.
Right.
I get that life sometimes is a little bit of a, I got to do that today. But you get to do that today. I saw a thing this morning. Instead of saying, what if, ask yourself, even if, right? I mean, that changes that dynamic quite a bit. If you just take a different tact.
Right.
Sometimes that's all you need to do is just remember to exhale every once in a while, and then just see if there's a way to make that beneficial.
Right. And oftentimes, if I'm nervous about something, I just say, Lord, let me be a fool for you.
Right.
Just let me be a fool for you.
I know. I think we've been all in those positions.
Yeah.
I'm just it's going to happen one way or the other. I might as well try to give it my best shot.
Exactly.
Let me ask you two ladies, do you tell the good news with your life?
I think that's the first place it starts, right?
Yeah. That certainly is the attempt.
Yeah.
On a regular basis because we've talked about this many times, DeVandis, on the podcast, is people will see how you are before they will engage you in a conversation. They want to look at the way you walk and talk and carry yourself.
Yeah. And to me, actions speak louder than words. I have several people in my life that say one thing and do another, and I'm always watching what they do before I'm listening to what they're saying.
Before you put your chips in that little pile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so thankful that we attempt to try to do this. And I'm saying we because the Swaggers, we all have deep connection with each other. And you definitely look at it and you see it beyond, the church. It blessed my heart, and I gave God all the glory and the praise when this couple, she left the faith because of church hurt, and her husband, never really had a relationship with God, and they asked me to marry them. And the reason why they asked me to marry them was because we do life with them, but we're consistent and we try to live it to the best of our ability. And it was something that they looked and they admired, and they were like, okay, they're trying to practice what they're preaching.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, I will end with a question for everybody out there in podcast land, unless you guys have something else you wanted to
Well, I have one thing I want to read that I just saw in a devotional that says, when everything is said and done, God won't say, well said, well thought, well planned, or well prayed, my good and faithful servant. There is only one commendation he will give. Well done, good and faithful servant. And that just really stuck with me because it is the done part, the action part. Faith equals footsteps.
Right.
Even uncomfortable ones.
That is so true. We already talked about most of my questions, but how do you respond to doubt? And specifically when others are mocking or pointing fingers, casting aspersions, whatever you want to say. But how do you respond to that? Because there are some folks that can put a thought in your head, right? And I think it's important to think about, like, you should often know the answer to the question before you ask it, because otherwise you might be really surprised. So if you need to go in armed, I think, with enough conviction to have a conversation. But there are times of doubt, and just maybe think about how you respond to that, and maybe why you respond to it in a particular way.
Right. That's good.
So, food for thought.
Just a little
Alrighty,
food.
guys.
A little food.
That was a great podcast today, and the deconstruction and don't be pew sitters really hit with me. But hey, guys, you know how we do it. Every day, every time, every week. This hour. We're about to sign off. But before we do, hit that thumbs up, that like button, share, and subscribe so you can stay in the know and enjoy a great conversation with Pam and Amanda each week at 8 a.m. Until then, we are